Hey everybody, Aaron Bishop here with the Bishop's Blurb. The day of Yom Teruah is in Judaism known as Rosh Hashanah, or New Year's Day. In the last video, we looked at this day and we saw that in Leviticus 23 and Numbers 29 is the only time that this day is described. Other than that, the Bible seems to be rather silent on what this day means or what kind of emphasis we should give to the day. So the question is, how did this day, this undescribed day of blowing trumpet blasts, how did it become known as the New Year's Day in Judaism? Especially when Exodus 12:2 states that the beginning of Nisan in the spring is to be the beginning of the year. Exodus 12:2, this month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Well, it turns out ancient rabbis, they read the Bible better than you or I read the Bible. And they notice several things in the Torah that don't seem to quite align with a spring New Year's Day. They discovered what they believed to be an overlapping alternate calendar hidden in the pages of Scripture. Now, this is not unheard of. We have multiple calendars in our society. We have our calendar year, but we also have our school year and our fiscal year and several other years that can all kind of overlap each other. Well, this secondary calendar in Judaism is thought to be aligned with the agricultural cycle that is hinted at in 3 places in the Torah. Place number 1, Exodus 23:16. And ye shall keep the feast of the harvest of the first fruits of your labor. Of what you sow in the field you shall keep the feast of ingathering, being Sukkot, at the end of the year when you gather in from the field the fruit of your labor. Now Sukkot, which is in the 7th month, or the month of Tishri, which might also be the 1st month, is described in this verse as occurring at the end of the year. Sukkot is a celebration of when you gather in your produce from the field. Piece of evidence number 2, Deuteronomy 11:11 through 12. But the land that you are going over to possess is a land of hills and valleys which drinks the water by the rain from the heavens. A land that the Lord your God cares for. The eyes of the Lord your God are always upon it from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Now the key idea here is that the rains are described as coming from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And throughout the Bible we read of the former rains or the latter rains. Well, in Israel the former rains come in the fall and the latter rains come in the spring. During the summer, there's no rain. And so this verse is thought to be speaking of this rain cycle that begins in the fall and ends in the spring. Piece of evidence number 3, Leviticus 25:8 through 9. And you shall count 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that at the time of the 7 weeks of years you shall have 49 years. Then you shall sound a loud trumpet on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the day of atonement you shall sound the trumpet throughout all your land. This chapter, Leviticus 25, it deals with what's known as the Shemitah, or the year of rest every 7 years. But every 50th year there is the year of release, where everyone returns back to the land of their ancestors, and all debt is forgiven. And the question is, why is this declared in Tishri and not in Nisan? Why do we start the count in the 7th month and not the 1st month? Well, it's the combination of these ideas that led to Rosh Hashanah being founded as a holiday, as the beginning of the year in what is sometimes the 7th month, but which is also the 1st month. You see, the agricultural cycle in Israel, it ended just before the 7th month began. Once the produce was all in and gathered, then they would hold multiple celebrations, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, all in the 7th month, as celebrations of the ingathering of the produce of the field. When Sukkot was over, they would go back and they would begin the cycle of crops once again by planting the winter barley fields. That winter barley would then be harvested in the spring just before Passover. And then 50 days later, the wheat crops would come in, and then throughout the summer, the rest of the produce would grow, only to start the cycle again in the 7th month. Or is it the 1st month? The celebration of Rosh Hashanah, it didn't come out of nowhere. In fact, in Judaism, it's thought that Rosh Hashanah is the celebration of the 7th day of creation. God worked for 6 days, and on the 7th day, he rested. And after that 7th day, the agricultural cycle began for the world and has been rolling on ever since. Rosh Hashanah is a celebration of a cycle of life. Here in the West, we celebrate New Year's Day on an arbitrary date that's picked in the middle of winter, January 1st. But in Judaism, their New Year's Day isn't one that's just arbitrary. It's one that was picked for a reason and for a purpose because it fit into the way they lived their lives. And that's why Judaism celebrates Rosh Hashanah.